Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Battle Cry. This week we're putting the spotlight on an amazing piece of equipment that India, public and private, have turned around in record time. It's the Zorawar light tank that India plans to deploy in Ladakh because in 2020 when the Chinese came to the border, India was found lacking. Here is finally the Zorawar.
साल 2020 में लद्दाख में गलवान की खूनी भिड़ंत के बाद भारतीय सेना को एक लाइट टैंक की जरूरत महसूस हुई क्योंकि उस दौरान चीन ने लद्दाख सरहद पर भारत के खिलाफ अपने T-15 लाइट टैंक को तैनात किया और उसके बाद DRDO ने लार्सन एंड टूब्रो के साथ मिलकर इस लाइट टैंक पर काम शुरू किया। आज हम आपको आज तक पर पहली बार लाइट टैंक की एक्सक्लूसिव तस्वीरें दिखा रहे हैं और यहाँ पिछले 2 साल में DRDO ने लार्सन एंड टूब्रो के साथ मिलकर यहाँ हजीरा में इस लाइट टैंक पर काम शुरू किया जिसके अब ट्रायल शुरू हो गए हैं। इसकी अब मारक क्षमता की हम बात करते हैं। अगर ये देश में बना पहला स्वदेशी लाइट टैंक है जिसके वजन की बात करें 25 टन इसका वजन है और इसकी गन आप देखें 155 मिलीमीटर की ये गन इसमें लगाई गई है। खासतौर से रूस यूक्रेन युद्ध से सबक लेते हुए जो रूस यूक्रेन युद्ध के दौरान रूस के जो टैंक हैं T-90 T-72 टैंक जिनका भारत भी इस्तेमाल करता है उसको जिस तरह का भारी नुकसान हुआ उसको देखते हुए इस तरह के चाहे UAV सिस्टम की इसमें बात की जाए आधुनिक दूसरे जो संचार सिस्टम इसमें लगाए गए हैं उन तमाम चीज़ों से लाइट टैंक जोरावर को पूरी तरह से तैयार किया गया है। देश का स्वदेशी जोरावर टैंक रिकॉर्ड समय 2 साल के अंदर बनकर तैयार हुआ है और इस वक्त इसके फील्ड ट्रायल शुरू हो चुके हैं। DRDO के जो चेयरमैन हैं डॉक्टर समीर कामत वो खुद हजीरा पहुंचकर इस जोरावर टैंक का ट्रायल देख रहे हैं और आने वाले दिनों में बहुत जल्द ये भारतीय सेना में शामिल होगा। सर कितना बड़े मौके के तौर पर इसको आप देखते हैं क्योंकि एक रिकॉर्ड टाइम पर एक लाइट टैंक हम देख रहे हैं।
नहीं, इस चीज़ की हमारे आर्मी को बहुत ज़रूरत है, इसलिए DRDO और L&T ने मिलके ये टैंक जितना जल्दी हो सकता है उतना जल्दी एक सिनर्जिस्टिक काम करके बनाया है। ये 2-2.5 साल में पूरा डिज़ाइन और डेवलपमेंट इस टैंक का कंप्लीट किया है और हमें उम्मीद है कि अगले 6 महीने में हम लोग डेवलपमेंट ट्रायल्स भी कंप्लीट करेंगे। मुझे पूरी उम्मीद है कि 2-2.5 साल में ये फर्स्ट प्रोडक्शन मॉडल रेडी रहेगा इंडक्शन के लिए। सो 2027 में पहला टैंक इंडक्ट हो सकता है।
ये अगर हम इस वक्त के जो हालात हैं देश दुनिया में लड़ाई के भारतीय सेना की जो रिक्वायरमेंट है थोड़ा आप बताना चाहेंगे क्या किन किन चीज़ों को मॉडर्न वॉरफेयर के हिसाब से आपने इसमें इंडक्ट की है?
इसमें बहुत से आधुनिक कैपेबिलिटीज़ इसमें बिल्ड की गई है। आप जो इसकी मोबिलिटी देखते हो ये पावर पैक है, ये इसकी पावर टू वेट रेशो 30 से ज़्यादा है। इसमें रबर के ट्रैक्स हैं ताकि इसकी जो राइड क्वालिटी है बहुत ही स्मूथ हो। इसकी एजिलिटी बहुत ज़्यादा है, ये सैंड ड्यून भी चढ़ पाएगा, ये माउंटेन्स में भी हम इसको ले पाएंगे।
In a major boost to Indian forces deployed opposite China in Ladakh, the DRDO and L&T have started trial of the indigenous light tank Zorawar, developed in record time of 2 years for the high altitude areas of Ladakh. The tank is testimony of Indian progress in indigenous manufacturing. With camera person Anil Jaiswal, this is Manjit Negi for India Today in Hazira.
So how important is the Zorawar light tank? What is it going to do for India's defense and offense posture in eastern Ladakh and other high altitude areas? To discuss this, put the spotlight on this project after a great deal of media attention, I'm joined now by Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni. He's a former Chief of Staff of the 14 Corps in Ladakh. He is a war hero from the Siachen operations and also served as DG Infantry. Major General SVP Singh has been Additional Director General of Artillery. He's also served in Ladakh. Colonel Dini has led a battalion, an infantry battalion in Ladakh during a very crucial phase of operations, most recently in eastern Ladakh. And Abhijit Iyer Mitra is our favorite observer, commentator and analyst on all things military and strategic affairs. Gentlemen, welcome. Thank you very much for your time here on this episode of Battle Cry. General Kulkarni, I'd like to start with you. With your opening comments about the Zorawar tank. You know, this tank is, has been developed and turned around in record time, according to media reports, in barely a couple of years, reacting to China's perceived advantage, having more agile, armored vehicles in the Ladakh region. What is your view of this? Is the Zorawar in some ways, a game changer, giving the Indian Army something it didn't have in the mountains?
Definitely, Shiv. Definitely. I think for high altitudes, a super thing. One couldn't have asked for more because we saw what the Chinese could do. And based on what they were able to do, though our T-90s were excellent, amphibious, no doubt about that. But surely, you can say, with the higher power to weight ratio, mobility, the communication facilities, you can say substantial firepower and protective elements to it, all of it combined. 25-ton weight, 750 horsepower engine, something which we were looking forward to. Anti-drone capabilities, all fitted with artificial intelligence, third generation, all of it when you see something that we're looking for. And nothing like being even the ability to lift 2 tanks in our transport aircraft. What more could we have asked for? And actually, Depsan plains, even Chushul and all along the river Indus at places, something that can really change at altitudes as high as 5,000 meters plus at any point of time. Moving around, it becomes very difficult. And especially now, when we can, in this kind of light tanks, which is the need of the hour, and ability to be able to do, and the engines must not cease. Very important is much that we would have had much better tanks and T-90s, 40, 50 tons and all, but it's very difficult. Mothballing, there's that, so many things required to be done for winter. Here's a light tank which will have all the abilities to be able to sustain itself 365 days, move around with those capabilities. Is what we really require, because in the Tibetan plateau, unlike the Chinese, where the Tibetan plateau for us is very restricted, the Chinese have a huge plateau where they actually can move around along the highways and come as close to our LAC. But to us, at certain places where we really need them, I think this is going to be a game changer. And I'm sure the Chinese, even though despite they are having the Q-15s, they are also trying very hard to be at it. And there is also
and just to be clear, the requirement for these light tanks was something that India reacted to. The fact that the Chinese had the Type 15 tanks over there is one of the things that triggered the urgency in India getting this capability. Also, it's going to be a while before the Zorawar, just to be absolutely clear, is ready to be deployed in Ladakh. That could take a while right now because it's still in the prototype phase. Abhijit, where do you stand on this? There's been quite a bit of hoopla over the Zorawar, justifiably so because of the quick turnaround, the ability of L&T and DRDO to turn it around very quickly and, put it into trials. But where do you stand on what kind of role it will play and whether it will be a game changer for India in Ladakh?
Thanks, Shiv. I think we have to be very careful of these silver bullet solutions, as admirable as it is that the DRDO has come up with this in record time, given our very troubled history with developing weapons and things like that. This is good. This is maybe a first step in the development thing where you've got a Cockerel turret, you've reused an old chassis for it, and you've added armor to it. This is probably a smart way of doing things. My issue really is with the equivalence kind of posture that we've taken. We've not taken asymmetricity with a neighbor who is much larger, much richer, and much higher levels of logistics, even on the Tibet plateau itself. And instead, we're matching them, tank to tank, category to category, and things like that. This kind of mirroring isn't a very smart strategy. Remember, the USSR tried this with America. And it essentially, the naval part of it bankrupted them, where Admiral Gorshkov went on coming up with submarine for submarine, sometimes 3-4 submarines for a submarine kind of thing. It doesn't work. The second thing we need to remember is, this tank will provide important fire support to ground troops for sure. We've learned this from the Ukraine war, that there is no substitute for guns. For all the missiles and things you have, it is ultimately infantry supported by artillery doing all the fighting. Now, when it is infantry supported by artillery doing all the fighting, do you really need a tank like this, given in this day and age? I completely accept that, in the previous wars, the AMX-13s played a huge role. The AMX-13 light tanks played a huge role in capturing several passes from the Pakistanis and things like that. But that era is past. Today, these tanks can be made mincemeat with just 1 or 2 kilos of explosives with top-fly ammunition or drones and things like that. How often have we seen that? So my real worry is, are we prioritizing our finances and our development efforts to suit our budget? That's my real worry here.
This is a very, very important point, and I'm glad you raised it, and I'll take that to Colonel Dinny before I go to General Singh. Colonel Dinny, since you served in Ladakh very recently, you know about what the fight there actually looks like. You've seen the Chinese strength there. Abhijit's contention is that while it is creditable, for the industrial base in India to push out a tank like this to meet a requirement in record time, the larger concern is whether this is very limiting, whether this is a kind of, a bean count approach. They've got tanks, so we'll get similar tanks to match them, instead of thinking bigger, because this is a larger enemy we're facing. What do you think about the Zorawar in that context, Colonel Dinny?
Shiv, I think, I myself being an infantry officer and General Kulkarni being an infantry officer, having spoken before me, I think we both agreed to that point, that it's too early to write off the tank. And I think...
no, nobody's writing off the tank.
Yeah, I mean, to say that it is not going to be that effective is, I think, too premature. Of course, there are a lot of discussions which are happening after the Ukraine-Russia war and, what is happening. I totally agree with, and in fact, what Abhijit mentioned is also partially correct. But having served there in Ladakh, what I'm fascinated by is by the Zorawar tank is the mobility which it brings to the table. And Shiv, we must understand there are two scenarios there. One is the hot war scenario where the war happens, and what Abhijit mentions is absolutely right. Air Force does have a very strong advantage over the tanks during a hot war scenario. But primarily what we are looking at right now is a border management posture. How do we handle the Chinese manage the line of actual control? There, this mobility of these tanks will be of use, will actually be the difference between what happened in 2020, the ease and with the kind of with which they could bring those reserves into that area and which change the status quo. That can be prevented by the presence of these tanks in close proximity. The fact that this is there, this particular, let's say, a squadron of tanks is there, and General Kulkarni will agree with me that a squadron of tanks with infantry occupying passes, I don't think anybody else can. It will be very difficult to cross over towards this side, even during hot war scenario. So we are talking of a border management posture as of now, and in that scenario, the situation which happened in 2020, one of the greatest disadvantage which we had was movement of these tanks, the mobility of these tanks. The mobility of these tanks by road, I saw it, the difficulty with which it moved through the tank transporters and all, it was absolutely nightmare for those commanding officers. For these tanks to move is relatively easy,
Okay.
So I think the commanders on ground will have that operational flexibility to move these tanks as and when where a situation develops, especially in those areas of differing perceptions.
Okay, so you've made a very important, a provocative point. You're saying that if a capability of the kind that the Zorawar brings to the fight was available in 2020, perhaps the swiftness with which the status quo changed could have been in some ways checked. I'll return to that point in my second round, but General Singh, bringing you in on this, your thoughts on the Zorawar, Equaliser, Gamechanger, or something else in Ladakh?
Shiv, I think this light tank Zorawar was a must-need of the Indian Army. And post-1971 war, when we had PT-76, it had done a stellar job in Bangladesh. And that lesson we forgot, the need of having light tank. So it's a very welcome step. Secondly is, the battlefield needs flexibility of its battlefield weapon systems. And in the tanks itself, with T-72 and T-90 already there in Ladakh, I think Zorawar gives an additional flexibility to the field commanders to employ in a most mobile and mobility as well as firepower, which it has now the capability. Secondly, the battlefield is an integrated system where the artillery guns, the infantry combat vehicles, and the air defense systems, and in today's warfare, drones, they are all going to be in combination to provide you the optimized firepower. And that is where both our strategic and tactical strategic thought and tactical employment will come into play. And I feel that it's a very welcome step. Zorawar is the right step. It is definitely an equalizer, and time will tell us whether it is a game changer. It is not only in Ladakh. It is not, Shiv, it is not only in Ladakh. This tank with amphibious capability will be very useful for our riverine trains in the Kutch backwaters and also out-of-area contingency plans. So, why so? Because light tanks need portability as well as mobility. Thank you.
So great point. You know, you're talking about how light tanks have served us in the past. General Kulkarni, to bring you back in on this and taking off from what General Singh said, the natural question then arises that how did light tanks fall off the table? You know, while we are praising the Zorawar, the uncomfortable truth of the matter also is that we were caught off guard without this capability when the Chinese came in, as Colonel Denny said, which means that somewhere along the way in our history, someone has, pushed light tanks off our arsenal. Even though we have real threats in Ladakh, super high altitudes, no one knows that better than you. So, there are some tough questions also to be asked about why we were caught without light tanks and being forced to, develop them in record time, sir.
Shiv, what had happened was even during and much before Galwan had happened, the movement of tanks was always there. And T-90s, T-72s did serve the purpose. They were 40, 50 tons. Even the light tank of the Chinese is approximately 40 tons. Zorawar is about 25 tons. The Chinese one is 40 tons with a 1,000 horsepower engine. So all said and done, our T-72s and T-90s were meeting all the... And our T-90s are also third generation. They also had amphibious capabilities. They have this ability. But all said and done, when you look at, high strategic mobility, when you're looking at protection, you're looking at communication, you're looking at logistics, you're looking at, protection, it is very, very essential. Because now look at it, the Chinese may have 2 crew members. We have 3 crew members in Zorawar. They have a kind of a hybrid system of the Q-50s that they have. So there's a lot that needs. It's nothing to say that, well, the Chinese have, so we must have. It isn't like that. There is a need, and that need is felt. That is why it is not a huge number. Maybe just about 6 odd regiments only may be equipped with it, not the whole of the Indian Army. But definitely, what General Singh is saying, there is a requirement. These light tanks are not necessarily for high altitude, though they have the ability to go at an average of 5,000 meters. They can very well be utilized in desert. Anyway, since mechanized infantry also stepped in a very big way. We also had artillery also in a very big way, which was again, on the tank chassis. So there's a lot that we already had. But a light tank, primarily ensuring that it does what it should do in areas like Dapsang Plains, in something like Chushul, in the eastern Ladakh. I think there's a lot of it, because in high altitudes, moving from one place to another place, it's very time consuming, it's very tiring. And something like this can move in a short span of time and be there. It is a lot. And what can is absolutely the border management shift is very, very important, because border subsequently. But border management...
So you're saying, General Kulkarni, I'm almost out of time, but I'm just saying, Colonel Denny, you want to take that question, that there's no way around getting this capability? Priorities are one thing, but we need this capability?
Yes, Shiv. I think this is a priority as well. Like what General Kulkarni mentioned, we are just talking about 6 to 7 regiments. It is not the entire Indian Army, the armored columns of the Indian Army is being made into light tanks. No, it is just 6 to 7 regiments, primarily high altitude based. After having gone through an operational experience of facing the Chinese, we felt now it has been felt that it is a need of the hour. Now,
Yeah.
what you mentioned, the question that how did we lose sight of in between? Like you would know, General Thimayya had taken the tanks to Zojila, and the mere presence of those tanks was a game changer. And after that, even in 62, light tanks were used. But after that, the focus shifted to park centric, and that is why these medium and heavy tanks took the center stage, and light tanks were forgotten. But now, after 2020, and even before that, the tanks were there, but light tanks were not present at these locations.
Okay.
So the presence of light tanks, close proximity of light tanks along with the infantry will help in the peace and tranquility of the line of actual control. That is what, to a great extent. I mean, we can try. I'm not sure, because Chinese can still come up with something else, but our capability will act as a deterrent.
Okay, it's very important, and you've given us a great deal to actually think about. Unfortunately, I'm out of time. I had many more questions, but I have a feeling that we're going to be doing a part 2 on technology for the army in Ladakh. Abhijit, apologies. I was hoping to come back to you, but we're out of time. So maybe for the next episode of Battle Cry. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me on this big spotlight episode on the Zorawar light tank. The Zorawar becomes a reality. It's still a couple of years away from actually being inducted, but comes at a time when Ladakh has been making headlines for a tank-related tragedy. A T-72 tank was almost washed away in a rising flash flood on the Shyok River in the northern parts of Ladakh, in the Daulat Beg Oldi sector, as a matter of fact, with 5 Indian Army soldiers washed away and drowning in the swell. Many hard questions have been asked over why the tank was not able to cross at night and why the response time left those men to actually drown. The hope is that a tank like Zorawar, with higher amphibious capabilities, greater agility, will provide Indian soldiers and officers deployed in our high-altitude battlefields better armored capabilities to be able to do the things they need to do and reach the places they need to reach. Well, that's it on Battle Cry. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next week with another episode. Thanks for watching.